Okay, so welcome to this first webinar of a series organized through the Nature First project. Today's topic is Caught in the Camera Trap, a needs-led exploration. Today we have Janke Schakel, the founder of Sensing Clues, who will provide us with a very nice and exciting webinar. Over to you, Janke.
Thanks very much, Menno. So next slide, please. I'm Janke Schakel, founder from Sensing Clues. And actually, we got quite a lot of questions related to data management because we are a foundation aimed at helping nature conservation organizations across the world with data and with all kinds of data-related questions. And one of the tools that is often being used is actually camera traps, a very valuable tool, but also quite a complex tool because you can use it for so many purposes and there are so many things to think about. So that many people actually through the forest do not see the trees anymore, or the other way around. Through the trees, they don't see the forest. And that's why we thought, let's organize for that. Next slide, please. We actually, Sensing Clues are part of a consortium, Nature First. We are a 3-year program, started 2 years ago, finishing in September. A large consortium of well-known institutes, as the ones shown here, all working together on innovations. Next slide, please. It's an European Union funded project where we aim at using remote sensing data from satellites, but also from camera traps and other sensors, combine it with forensics, or what kinds of things can you read in the data, in the science, and digital twins, which we will discuss in another webinar. And then we aim at enabling the mapping, the monitoring, and the predicting of things that change and happen in the landscape through time, continuously. So where possible in real time, often near real time, but always actual. And that will allow you to become way more proactive. And we are testing it and have tested it already in the first year and second year in a few sites. And we will have other webinars about that. Next slide, please. So when we talk about data, then often people like, anyone can make a photo with a camera. That doesn't make you a photographer, a professional photographer. And the same is true with data. Everyone can work with data, but it's important to understand how mature are you already in data and how can others maybe help you in achieving more and gaining more results with the data that you are collecting, or even maybe not collecting, but making use of open data that is out there to help you improve the management of your conservation areas. So we distinguish 5 levels of maturity. It starts with mapping anything and recording anything that's out there in the field. So it's indeed GIS information, but also camera trap information. What species do you see? Where do they occur? How often do they occur there? But also things like snares and tree species and other kinds of surveys. So anything that actually happens and that you would like to register is what we call mapping, recording it. Then if you start changing, if you start monitoring change through time, that's the second level. And then you want to see what are the changes and are these changes positive or not? And should we try to counter them or should we try to stimulate them? Then the third and the fourth level are building on top of that information, because once you see patterns in data, you can use these patterns to make predictions. And usually we do that in a periodic way. So let's say showing a pattern across a few months and predicting what will happen in the next few months. Where are the risky areas or the likelihood to find a certain species? In which areas should I look? And then, of course, the hallmark in our trade is to push these predictions to a real-time prediction and also use that information for scenario-based projections. We've got examples of that as well, and we'll dive into that in another webinar. Next slide, please. Just to give you a small heads up of one of these, let's say the real-time prediction applications is what we call a risk radar. It's a digital twin. And in this picture, you see predictions of human-wildlife conflicts with bear, based on historic data, based on the ecology of the bear, and based on lots of other science, and of course, the data that was collected in the past. And then based on information that is collected right now, we can make predictions of where the bear is, where it might be in the next few hours or the next 24 hours, and also where the risk for a new human-wildlife conflicts in those next 24 hours is high. This is a very nice webinar on its own and will be one of the next ones. Next, please. Menno, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Janke. So first, we would like to ask the audience a couple of questions, and we're going to do that through Slido. So if you could please use your phone, scan the QR code, or go in another browser to the website slido.com, and then enter the code 1516974. Then you can join this questionnaire. There's also a possibility to ask questions there. So there's also an audience Q&A that is open. So if you already want to post some questions that you have that we can then answer at the end of the webinar, towards the end of the webinar, that is also a possibility. And alternatively, you can also put in the chat here in the Google Meet your questions. So if you could please all join this Slido. And then we have the first question for you, and that is, are you in some way or form engaged in the management of a nature-rich area? So this is quite a broad definition. So are you engaged in the management of a nature-rich area? And the possibilities to answer. Can you still see my screen?
No.
No. Okay. Something went wrong there. Try to bring that back. Okay. Go. Okay. So it's a yes-no question. We have the first answers in. It's about 50-50. So the first question is, are you engaged in the management of a nature-rich area? Okay, so it's about 40-60%. Let's go to the next question. Which topics are you mapping and recording to manage your area of responsibility? So when you are involved in managing a nature area, or when you are interested in a nature area, what topics would you like to, or are you mapping, are you observing and recording that allow you and help you to manage that particular area? And this is going to be a word cloud, so you can type words up to 25 characters. So we have river, fisheries, trout, eel, so there's some fish-related topics. Species occurrence, salmon, habitat quality, animal density, the otter, nice. Insects in agriculture, mostly pest species. Large carnivores. And there's a second one, species diversity. So that comes up a little bit bigger now. Birds, trees. Nice. The habitat network.
Interesting.
Okay, so it's a large variety of topics that people are interested in mapping and recording. Okay, still participants typing, so let's wait a few more seconds to get some biotope occurrence. Also a topic. Okay, then we have another question, which is related to data sources. Which data sources are you using to meet your requirements? So obviously the camera trap is one of the data sources, but there are of course also other data sources. We're going to talk about the camera trap more in detail. But which data sources are you using to meet your requirements for the nature conservation? Acoustics, acoustic recorders, nice. Let's see if there are some other data sources that people are using. Field observations. Artificial intelligence for species ID. Historical data, nice. Yeah. eDNA. And there's still participants typing. There's still a few more seconds to put your input. Student project data, traps with lures, GPS tracker, expertise. Wow, wide variety of data sources. Very nice to see.
All right.
Okay, and then, we have one participant typing. Let's see. Literature review. Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, let's go to the final question for now before we go into more details. This is also going to be a word cloud, and we're looking to identify what are the main issues that you encounter in the process from recording, analyzing, and reporting. And if you see something on the screen that is also an issue for you, then please type in that exact name, because then it will appear bigger in the word cloud. So then we can see a little bit also which of these issues are most relevant for the participants in this call. So we already have one issue. Data pipelines is an issue that somebody encounters in the process from recording, analyzing, and reporting. But if you feel that an issue that is mentioned also is valid for you, then please also type that one, so then we get that a little bit bigger, and then we know a little bit which are really the important issues. We already get a lot of different issues. Unbiased survey, getting data out of proprietary software, counting of fish due to the number of frames per second in the video. Okay. Parasitic noises, standardization of analysis when conducted by a team. Okay, interesting. Multiple unconnected data sources, classification from videos. Wow, it is also here we have a nice variety of issues, Jan Kees.
Very good.
Human resources, also seen as an issue. Empty photos from the camera traps. So that's a specific one related to camera traps. And also the last one, counting of fish frames per second in the video. Okay. I think I don't see anyone typing right now. So I hope you have enough input then for your presentation, okay, further presentation.
Yeah, thank you.
Continue. Thank you all very much for your input. And we have a few questions towards the end as well. All right, back over to you.
Thanks. Next slide, please. Then here we start with caught in the camera trap. So what you see here is a picture of that addresses a few of the things that you mentioned. You have internal own data, your own camera tabs, maybe on a disk or whatever. It could be external, and it could also be public data. But the cam tab typically is something that you buy and you put in the fields, and you want to use it and combine it maybe with other data that you have. So integration and harmonization of the data is very important, so that you then can analyze it, maybe as it on its own. So the data is collected as one source, and you want to collect and analyze that data as one unit. But you may also want to combine it with many other different sources. And that is actually one of the things that the platform that we have been developing also with Nature First is helping you with. But this is the pipeline we will also be looking at in this webinar. Next slide, please. So before we dive into this is kind of the table of contents. Those are the main components that we will be discussing today. First of all, you've got the camera. Then you have to discuss how do you get the data. And the third one is then there's a lot of software, and there are classifiers, and there's reporting to be done and analysis to be done. And those components all have an influence on the results of what you actually want. So let's start with the camera. So the camera actually seems to be a simple thing, but it's not that simple. Of course, there's a purpose. What do you actually want to achieve? Are you, for example, looking for specific species? And then in combination with the habitat, are you looking for those species in the forest, in the meadows, or even underwater? Or are you looking for insects, or butterflies, or fish, or mammals? Then, of course, that determines to a high extent what kind of camera you need to buy. And of course, there's many brands in the market available, but that purpose is one of the leading ones for your camera choice. Then, of course, the question later, when you start analyzing the data, which we will address later, we will see what kind of questions do you have for the data, like do you want to know presence or distribution, abundance? That says more about where do you put the cameras. So if you put them in a structured way in the field so that you can conduct statistically relevant data, then it's about the positioning of the cameras, but it starts with the camera. The camera is also, the choice is also influenced by, is the species nocturnal, or does it live and do you see it during the day? And if it's during the night, then what kind of light are you using to highlight it? And if you use a flashlight, you may get a cat with these bright eyes, which might not be a problem for the identification of the species. In other cases, it might be problematic, and then you would like to use infrared or other types of illumination. So also, if the species are very fast, then of course the trigger between making the photo, detecting some movement and making the photo is important. And then are you indeed making a picture, just a single one, or are you making a burst so that you have more chance to capture the animals, or are you even making a short video so that you can use all the frames in that video later for analyzing what species did you see, and also how many are you seeing in that video. So those questions are all starting with what are the capabilities, of course, of this camera. There's more information about these angles and the speed and the flashlights and so on myriad, a very nice website. You can click on that link, not now, and then you will get it. You can get this presentation later if you ask for it, we will send you. Next slide, please. Once you've got a camera, then you've got actually two types. You've got cameras, and also if you talk about acoustics, you can have images that are stored locally on a SIM card or on a small card like this, or you actually wire them directly into a network, to a cloud. And it's important because if you put them on a card, you every now and then have to collect it, which disturbs the scene, which actually also you have to be present. It takes a lot of time to get there. And also, of course, that is a cost factor. But on the other hand, if you have to push them from the wild to your office somehow, then you need a connection, and that connection, it might not be simple because in many areas the GSM signal is poor, so you might have to relate to satellite communication, which also, of course, is not very cheap. And then when you have them in the cloud, it's important to know how you can get the data, because there are private systems where you can get all the data, but it's difficult to get it out. So one important consideration if you are using a cloud-based solution is how much access do you have to the data, and how flexible are you in using that data for the many different purposes that you have. We get to that later in the analytical part. So then you talk about, is it possible to push it to a telephone or to a server or to an analytical routine that is working somewhere else, living in the cloud? Can we pull the data from out the servers, or can we have an API connection and do many other things as well? So those are topics to be considered in the data transfer part. Next slide. The previous one, yeah. So when you look at the software could live on your desktop or in the cloud, but it's important that it takes care of the storage and that you store the data in a proper way, that you can find it easily back. So typically a camera tab is somewhere for a few weeks, and then you replace it to another location. And then it's important to know where the information is, where the camera was, and how you can use it for statistical purposes, and also that you can find it easily back. So metadata and storing it in a very logical way is important. And then the process that you go through with the data, uploading it, classifying it, documenting the metadata, the location and the purpose and those types of things. And then also analyzing the pictures is a process that software, there's quite a lot of packages available that help you to do that in a most logical way. The next step is that you have to analyze it. And for that, there are many classifiers available. And sometimes these classifiers are part and parcel of the solution that you buy. They might even be on the camera. But that means that these classifiers are also, of course, very, very important for your purpose. If you are looking for the links and the links is not recognized, then that classifier may not be useful for you. Or if you're looking for fish and that solution that we were looking at does not support the fish, then if it's not an open kind of platform where you can add more classifiers than the one that they service and they provide, then you are stuck. So it's important to see and to look for software that may give you flexibility in choosing one or more classifiers that are aligned with your research questions. Next slide. Then when you have used the classifiers, that's of course part of the analysis, but it only, well, not only, it tells you what's on the picture. Then you actually want to use that to analyze it deeper and to make reports like, what is the, are these species present in my area or not, or in this part of my area, in the north or the south or the west or not? How rich is my, is the area actually? How many species do I find? How are they distributed? Are there many of them or are there only a few? And what is the density in certain areas? Those types of questions are typical research questions for ecologists. And you have to think about them before you start your survey, because it determines again where you place your cameras, how high you are placing the cameras and so on. But it's important here also that you either have a solution which does it all for you already, and then the choice is simple. Often the choice is not that simple. Often you have these types of questions and you want the flexibility to work with the data, not in the silo, but outside the silo. So you want access to the data and use it in many other different ways. Of course, there it is a balance between what you can do yourself. How skilled are you with, for example, R packages and other open source libraries that are available, plentiful, but which require well, let's say statistical skills at least, but some programming skills are probably also required. And do you have them or not? Do you have people that can help you or not? And those also determine your choices that you have to make. Next slide. So when you look at classifiers, then the camera and the classifier are often kind of confused. The solution that's being sold or that people think they are buying is often confused with the classifier, but we really have to separate those and see them as separate projects. So if you're looking for a classifier, that classifier might run on the edge, on the camera, it might run in the cloud, it might run on your desktop. But it's important to know that those classifiers have their powers, but also the limitations. So one of the classifiers that almost everyone is using is the Microsoft Mega Detector. And it distinguishes between animals and people and objects like cars and bicycles. It's very useful because it allows you very quickly and quite efficiently to distinguish images which are empty from the ones that contain, for example, a mammal. So that is often, for that purpose, the Microsoft Mega Detector is often being used. Then if you are interested in European species, you could use the deep fawn classifier, which is a very accurate model for many species in Europe, but not covering all the species. And it's not useful for Africa because it doesn't know the giraffe or the buffalo or the elephant. So if you want species like that, you need to have a regional classifier, which allows you to classify African species or Indian species or species from the Latin Americas. And you can go one level deeper. And often those classifiers are also really used in sequence. So first you start with a mega detector, then you use a species detector, and then after that you can even use a individuals detector. So if you are are you monitoring a group of giraffes in an area, then you can use the giraffe spotter to identify the individuals and see whether the group is growing or not and how those individuals are using the territory. So those considerations are important to know, and if your software is capable of using the different types of classifiers, then you are more flexible and you know that you are better prepared for the future, because once you start working with camera traps, one thing is certain: your questions and your research questions will deepen and will expand, which means that you require agility. You don't want to be boxed into a solution that is not helping you in your next step of maturity. Next slide, please. So the classifiers is also a question often, which is often also confused. Do you want to create a classifier and then train and use the images to create a new one, which is called training, or are you a user? You want the classifier to be ready and to classify what's on the image for you as it is out of the box. Sometimes you want to do both, because there are species that maybe are not well recognized, but you quite often see them. And if you then can tag them and create a subset of images that can be used for training later by maybe another expert, then your execution will improve over time. So it really pays off to work together with others in a kind of consortium way, and have specializations, have special people that create detectors and classifiers, that train them and improve them. And but it requires people in the field that are using those classifiers to share their images, which is not a given. It's often quite sensitive, but it's very important for improving the quality of these classifiers. So when you choose a classifier, again, the question is purpose. What do you want to detect? And which species occur on it, and are they already included in your classifier or not? And if they are not included, then there's a few questions like, do you have the skills, or can you actually do you have access to the skills, maybe not in-house, but with a friend that can actually help you to improve the classifier or create it for you. Next one. So the next step is also, one of the purposes is, do you want the data to be used in real time for alerting you, or is it okay to use the data collected on ease and then process it every now and then? Let's say by the end of the month or the end of the year, you're processing all the data. Processing the data with hindsight is perfectly acceptable for doing many types of studies. Actually, it's the majority of studies. But if you want alerts to be created in real time so that people can respond in real time to the things that have been seen, then of course you need a system that's working on the edge, as we call it. So preferably the camera already does the classification and sends an alert out to a network. And also there, you don't want to be caught into a single solution, but you want to work with modules that can communicate with other vendors and make sure you are not caught up in a vendor lock. But also here, again, which habitat will you also require videos? Because sometimes it's very helpful, especially if you talk about coaching, for example. If you have a short video, you see a lot more than if it's just a photo. But of course, it's also taking more bandwidth, so more expensive to transmit. Those are important considerations. If you do not require real time, then why bother? Collect the cards from the field, unless, of course, the field site is very special, like if you are monitoring, let's say, the place where a bear is hibernating, you don't want to disturb the bear or the nest of an eagle, and then you would like the data to also be streamlined and be on the edge, and then classified maybe in the cloud or on the camera, and not collect the data for that purpose. So there are use cases where you really want or need streamlined data, but for conducting a census and establishing all kinds of statistics, batch processing is often enough. Next slide. Another consideration is, of course, also performance and ownership rights. There are quite a lot of platforms that allow you to use their platform for free, but sometimes they even say the data is yours. But sometimes in the next line it says, but the data is also ours, and we can also do whatever we want with it. If that is a no-go, then read the instructions and read the general terms and conditions of those solutions, because you don't want to be caught in a surprise later. Performance is an issue. There are solutions that are free, but they do not perform very well in terms of speed. But of course, they are free. So if you pay, then you will have a higher performance. And then your results will be analyzed, for example, in the cloud, in Azure or AWS. And they will be making use of a paid service of AWS rather than the free services. But there is, of course, then the cost element. Again, if you are not really interested in real-time performance, time is not of the essence, then you can economize on the cost, but it will take a bit longer for the images to be processed. And security, of course, is also an important part, especially if you are monitoring species that are also being poached. Next one. Security actually also means not only in the cloud, but also on your desktop. If you put them on your desktop and you share the results on a floppy disk, then actually that's also, I also worked with the police, having data on an external drive or floppy disk, but you can bring with you anywhere you go is a security risk, because you can lose it. It can easily be multiplied without you knowing it, and then it will actually be out there outside your control. Another important thing when you are talking about classifiers is your ability to play with it and to correct it. So an important question in the software is also, is there the opportunity to include a human in the loop? And human in the loop means that you can look at the results of the classifier and then correct it if needed. So if the classifier tells you this is a boar, and you look at it and you say, well, it's actually not a boar, it's just a normal pig, then you would like to correct that. And of course, ease of use and ease of learning it is also important, because in many organizations are quite small. There's only a few people that can do it. And sometimes they are students, or they are only with you as an intern for a few months. If it takes them the first 3 months to, then you only have 2 or 3 months left to process and so on. So ease of use and the speed of how fast you can make it your own is an important criterion. And the same is true for export. You really want the data, all of the data, to be exportable, so that you are able to use it in any type of algorithm later, in any type of environment which in the future might pop up, which you develop yourself, or which might be offered by someone else. You want your data to be free, at your disposal, and use it in any way you like it. And that's important. So you see this picture here, your analysis could be based on different databases that are somehow can be reached. Those databases all have their own capabilities. You want to be able to make most of it. Next. So now we come to the classifier. So this is actually a kind of decision tree, and it starts on the left hand. So it starts with your purpose. What do you actually want to achieve? And then the first most important question is, what species, or do you actually want to recognize any species? If so, of course, then you have to ask yourself, is this classifier already available in the field? And if so, yes, who has it? And if it's not available, then do you have the skills to train one yourself? Do you also have sufficient number of images to train a new one? And if you have the skills, then go ahead, develop the classifier, and until the classifier is present. And if not, then there are options available to outsource it. And there's also a few parties, if you want to know, you can contact us, who are specialized in creating new classifiers and improving the quality of classifiers. If you have questions about that, reach out. If the classifier is available, the next important question is, do you need the data in real time, or is batch sufficient? If you need the data in real time, then there's a list of option types of real-time solutions that I will show in a minute. And those actually facilitate you with that. But then again, you have to check those solutions with your requirements that we just discussed in the previous slides. So how easy is it to use? What is the cost of performing it? Can you share your data across? Is the security well? Can you export things? And is the data siloed? Are you imprisoned with a vendor login? Or can it be integrated? And can it be integrated with other types of resources? For example, if you also use acoustic monitoring, is there also a way of using taxonomies to harmonize the data that are being collected from the camera traps, to harmonize that seamlessly without effort with data that you are collecting, or from field observations, or from any other eDNA and other methods that are being used. So list A is not a simple, it is ending there. It is giving you a few options that show you classifiers that run and that can be used in real time. You still have to see, is this classifier then also available with this real-time solution that is out there? And if not, you go back into this loop. If it's real time, then you need to know, does it require in the cloud? So if it's not necessary in real time, but you do want it in the cloud, because you want, for example, to work with a group of analysts to classify things, then if it needs to be in the cloud, because it cannot be on a desktop. On a desktop, you typically work with only one analyst who is working with a classifier and who is in the loop to correct the results. If it's in the cloud, you can work with the crowds. You can even work with citizen scientists who help you classifying images. If you want that, list B is there. If not, you go to list C. And list C means you've got a desktop application where you can manage your images. You don't have any problems with internet connectivity or uploading terabytes of data, which is often quite problematic, especially in Africa, but also in many regions in Europe. And then list C might be of a better purpose. For all of these, the other considerations always apply. So it is what I said, the list ABC is not just a stop, but it is a start to look at them and see how easy are they to use, which species and habitats are we looking at, which specs of the camera are required, and can you create a modular system that complies with all your requirements. So this picture also shows why answering your question of which camera should I use is not that simple. There are so many considerations that have to be taken into account. But we hope actually that this flowchart helps you in pruning the choices. So there's thousands of choices, but now they can be drilled back to a limited number. And for each requirement that you have, you can open the discussion based on, do we have the classifier? If not, then let's first find that classifier and or see who can develop it for us at the most economic cost. And where do we get the images from? Do you yourself have already the images? Or can you use an open source database or databases from befriended organizations to create a classifier? So before we now go and have a look at list ABC, we've got a few questions.
Yes, and the first question is, are you currently using camera trap solutions? Yes or no? So we go back to the same Slido, and I hope this, yeah, it's coming up right. So let's see. 60% so far is using camera trap solutions out of 5 participants. So that is 3. Let's see if there are any other people using camera trap solutions. Okay, so about 60% of the participants are using camera trap solutions. Let's then go to the next question, which is, if you're using this camera trap solution, which camera trap solution or solutions do you use? So we're interested to hear what kind of solutions are you using. Mega detector is 1. Zycam 7.
Not seen that one before. Interesting.
Deep learning object detection.
All right. Thanks very much. Then we move on.
Okay.
So these are the lists. I made an inventory of systems that I have not been using all of them, of course, but we use quite a lot of them and we are familiar with quite a lot of them. And then you see that real time in the cloud, there are not so many, but there's a few. There's probably more than I know. Those are the ones that we are not that familiar with, because most of the applications are intended on research, ecological research. And there you see there's lots of applications in the cloud, and there's other ones that are on your desktop. So a big advantage of is that you do not have to push all your images and videos, which could be in the terabytes, over the internet. You've got full control over your images and so on. In the cloud, there is also quite a lot of advantages. You can work with multiple people on classifying things. On the other hand, the storage cost and the processing time might be quite expensive, especially if you are using camera traps in a long term. Then the cost of storage on the internet could be substantial. I know of one project which spent 25,000 euros on an annual basis on only storage. So the question you have to ask is it worthwhile to put all that data and keep it all the time in the cloud, or can I download it again to a hard drive, which is way cheaper, and use the classified services and the premium services in the cloud, but also on your desktop. Use them temporarily until you've got your results. Bucky actually has a question.
Yes,
Giel,
we have the
I know
first
the name
question.
behind,
Hey,
I know the
okay.
name behind Bucky. Hi, Giel.
Hi,
Yes,
Gate.
go on.
Good to meet you again. Can any of these solutions work with videos?
Many of them can, yes. Yeah, not all of them, but most actually at this moment. There are not so many solutions. The modern ones, many of these are among the modern ones, can work with videos.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have to look at each one to see which ones can.
Yeah,
Okay.
so this is a solution which is many of them, and not all of them, but many of them are kind of complete solutions. So they accept the camera, they allow you to process. This is software, so they allow you to process the images and so on and classify them. So this is I should say this is a software solution list. But for example, wildlife protection solutions includes also cameras that they provide with their solutions. And others like DeepFawn are really very, very good in their classifiers, but their software is not the best. Others are better. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, are there any other questions from any of the other participants? We still have some time to take a few questions. If so, please raise your hand or type the question in the chat box.
So the first question, which is usually the one that needs to be answered, is the classifier available for the species that I'm interested in? That's where your search should start. And if you, for example, look at WildID, that is a solution that's mostly being used in the southern parts of Africa, actually working in Europe, then WildID is not likely to go to be a proper solution for you, because it's not easy to add another classifier that takes care of the European species. So start with the classifier, and then use those other considerations in the blue box to see if one of the solutions in those lists matches your requirements. I actually have one more question, and I realized that we did not have a poll for it. But I would like to learn from you whether this overview is helpful for you, if it helps you in deciding what to do or how you make your best choices, or did you learn a bit about how ChemTab solutions are. What did you learn would be a nice question. I don't know if you can put it up just instantly,
Yes.
Menno, and otherwise
Yes,
you can put it in the cloud.
I can do that, I think. We now go to the no. I think it.
And then I actually have 3 questions. One of them, what did you learn? Was it useful? And what did you learn? And the second or third question, first one, was it useful? Second, what did you learn? And the third, what would you like as a future topic for our webinars? Because we are covering quite a lot of areas and we have lots of ideas of webinars, but it would also be good to hear from you what you would like to dive into in another occasion, because then we can organize such a deep dive.
Okay.
Now Menno is sweating.
Let me see. Let me see if I can do that.
Sorry for putting you on the spot, Menno.
Was it useful? What did you learn? What else do you want to know, Jan Kees?
What did you learn? Was it useful? What did you learn? And the last one, what would you like to have addressed as a future webinar, so that we can prepare that?
Okay.
We have a few on the list already, so we will, but we can tune them and we can prepare also other ones if there's a high demand for a webinar on that topic.
So let me see if I can do that. All right.
There's a question of Lakshmi. What is your preferred tab camera Let me see. If the project is taking place in Southern Africa. So this question is indeed a question that we often get in many different ways. So my first question then, are you really talking about the camera that you need to put into the fields? Bushnell is a perfect camera. Or are you talking about the solution? And then the question is, if it's okay to cost a little bit of money, then Wild ID is a very nice one. Pepper is a good one. It's free, but it's a bit slow because it uses free resources, and it's also, in terms of user friendliness, the learning curve is quite steep. It's not easy to master, but it's a good tool. So those would be two that I would consider for South Africa, southern parts of Africa.
Okay.
So we got 4 people in the poll, which is out of 20, not that much yet. So it's nice to see 100%, but I would like to get a few more responses to get a better statistical feel with how useful this was for you.
It's a bit black and white, eh? Yes or no. Maybe it was somewhat useful. So
we are very, let's say,
very binary. 0 or 1.
Yeah, all or nothing.
Okay. All right. Maybe the next one is a little bit more flexible. That is, I hope. It's in the other way around. What did you learn? Was a question. So that let me put that up now.
What are your takeaways? If you have to mention 1 or 2 things, what did you learn? What do you bring home? Lots of options there. Yeah, it's really a myriad. There are many more solutions out there than the ones that are listed in solution A, B, and C. Those 3 lists. Many of them also require quite a lot of programming skill. They are open source, but they require you to be a programmer. The ones that I mentioned are the ones that are still quite a lot in use and have a large customer base, but there's probably many more, especially when you zoom in on different regions. A bit of mix-up here.
Classifier choice should be decided early on.
Yeah.
Different levels of classification options.
Yeah, PyTorch also nice. It was in the list, but if you've not heard about it before, Py is if you are a little bit skilled with Python, which is quite an easy language, but then having a tool that you can expand yourself is very nice because you know Py, and then PyTorch is also a good choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then we have a final question, I think.
Yeah.
And that is, I hope. Yeah, what would you like to have addressed as a future topic for a webinar? So we are organizing a series of webinars. We'll have at least 1 per month, but we have options to also create more. So is there any particular topic that you would like to see addressed as a future webinar? And this is an open text kind of field, so you can elaborate a little bit if you would like. Digital twins current state is one topic.
That is actually a webinar which we indeed are planning. When do you know? Maybe when it was? Or Rebecca?
Is Rebecca on the call?
On the 24th of April.
Right, thank you.
Issues, problems after building the video model. How did you solve them? What was the result?
Yeah. All right. Nice.
Forensic.
Nice topic, Tim. There will be forensics, right? There will be a forensics workshop online, a webinar.
Yeah, actually, that's the next webinar.
The next one, next month.
The 27th of February is going to have the topic forensics.
All right.
So we'll show you a little bit, as a last slide, we have a little bit of information.
Yeah, Anonymous ask for data fusion, different types of data and how to merge them, how to harmonize them. So that is something we can indeed organize. Also, maybe with the Semantic Web Company, Albin, one of our consortium members. They are specialized in taxonomies and ontologies, which are a key facilitator in integrating data across different systems. AI recognition and pipelines. The pipeline was mentioned before, and also like all these different silos and the sources that you are using from DPS, eDNA, and so on. How can you use them? So I will also think of a workshop where we can talk a bit more about deep learning, how to create your classifiers, and how to construct your pipeline. In that case, I will not be the presenter, but someone who's really experienced in that particular part of the process. But we will see if we can organize that as well. Yeah.
And then we have agricultural entomology.
Entomology, yeah. Interesting. I'm not familiar with that subject, so I don't know if the person asking for it is him or herself is an expert. Because we are also organizing these webinars together with many others. So you are also, if you have a subject that you would like to bring in, feel free to do so. Thank you, Megan, Lewis, for joining.
Yeah, we have 1 more minute, and then we're going to wrap up this webinar and the recording. We will have the recording available for those interested, and of course you can always reach us also. And let me actually bring up the final slide, which is 2 save the dates. One is for the next webinar, as I mentioned, the 27th of February. You can scan the QR code if you already would like to join and register. And we also have the Nature First conference on the 25th and 26th of June at Ouwehands Dierenpark in Renen. And if you're interested to join that as well, you can scan that QR code, and hopefully we can meet in person there later this year in June in the Netherlands. With that, we are at the top of the hour. Thank you very much all for joining and for your interaction and participation. Thank you very much, Jan Kees, for sharing with us your insights on the camera traps and all the things that relate to that. A lot of positive thumbs up. Thank you all very much. Have a great continuation of your day, and hope to see you in the webinar next month.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Most welcome. Bye-bye.